Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom Mevorach. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom Mevorach. Igrat kala, igrat kala, b'nei Shabbat, dekabla, dekabla, echadodi. Igrat kala, b'nei Shabbat, dekabla, dekabla. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom Mevorach. One more time. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom Mevorach.
Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos to everyone. It's so nice to see you tonight after what has been quite a hot week. I hope everyone was able to stay cool, and it's great to see you tonight. While I'm not a monarchist, there was a significant death yesterday, and of course our thoughts and prayers are with the royal family as we mourn the passing of Queen Elizabeth. I want to acknowledge our special guest tonight, Congressman Mike Thompson, who's going to be speaking a little bit later. I've been in Napa now for 5 years. I've seen you at a few different functions. We've never met before, but I'm delighted to welcome you into our congregation. Is this the first time you've been here, or have you been here before? You've been here maybe many times.
He's practically a member.
Practically a member, okay. I'm going to introduce Congressman Thompson a little bit later, but a very special Shabbat Shalom to you and to Myra, part of Congressman's team, and a special shout out to Rebecca Koch, friend and CBS member, for making the introduction and helping to make this happen. We're going to begin by lighting our Shabbat candles on page 120, and I would like to invite up CBS President Roberta Solomon to do us that honor.
Are these the trick candles?
Hopefully not.
Okay. Try to do this without burning myself.
Right.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
You know, whether you're a congressman or a rabbi or some other kind of community leader, it's often hard to keep your population together. People have lots of different opinions. People disagree on lots of different things. And we can only imagine what it was like for the Queen of England to try to manage the entire Commonwealth of families. One way that you do it, and I would assume you would agree, is with peace and respect. And so this next song, Shalom Aleichem, is a prayer in which we ask God to bestow peace on all of us during this Sabbath and at all times. Page 142.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon. Mihi Melech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rohem Shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon. Mihi Melech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon. Mihi Melech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zeichem Shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon. Mihi Melech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Our call to worship, the Baruch Hu, is on page 146. If you are able, please rise.
Lai la lai la lai la lai lai. Lai la la lai la lai la lai lai. Lai la lai 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 la lai lai lai. Lai la la lai la lai la lai lai. Lai la lai 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 la lai 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 la lai lai lai. Baruch et Adonai.
Please remain standing and join me at the top of page 149. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. Page 151. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works, and the living language that gives it form? Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Page 152 and 3. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavacha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam V'shivtecha b'veitecha, uv'lektecha v'derech, uv'shokbecha uv'humecha, uv'kshartam la'ot al yadecha, v'hayu l'totafot bein einecha, uv'tavtam al mezuzot beitecha, ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Page 157, please join me at the top of the page. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Micha Mocha is on page 158.
Micha Mocha ba'elim Adonai, Micha Mocha nedar b'kodesh, norat tehilot osef eleh, norat tehilot osef eleh, machutecha ra'u banecha, bukei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, zeli anu ve'amru Adonai imno le'olam va'ed. Micha Mocha ba'elim Adonai, Micha Mocha nedar b'kodesh, norat tehilot osef eleh, norat tehilot osef eleh.
Page 161. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
Asvivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. Hamidenu shomreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Asvivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. Aminenu shomreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Shelter us beneath your wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harm.
Please take a moment now for your own silent thoughts and prayers.
Page 179. Lo yisago Yehovoy cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. 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 Hey, oh, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey. Lo yisago Yehovoy cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Yisago Yehovoy cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo yisago Yehovoy cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo yisago Yehovoy cheret, lo yilmedu
At this point in our service, we pause and think of those in need of healing on this Shabbat, healing of body, healing of spirit, and healing of heart. And we ask God to bestow the bracha, the blessing of refuah shlema, full and complete healing on the following men and women from our community or those known and loved by our congregation: Ilana Massey, Kevin Brackett, Michelle Camisia, Joshua Hyman, Diane Butler, Jesse Friedman, Beverly Eigner, Marjorie Gilberg, Michael Blend, Jim Mates, and Scott Cohen. And if anyone has a name they would like to add to our list, either here or at home, I invite you to please do so. And Misha Berach is on page 511.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. We bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
The Aleinu prayer is on page 586. If you're able, please rise.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'chol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורל עלינו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
Please be seated. I have the honor now of inviting up Shane Soldinger to share some important announcements with you. Shane is our treasurer. He is a friend, and he is on weekends a rock star. Aren't you guys performing this weekend somewhere, I read? Silverado Pickups? Couple weeks, okay. Shane has some announcements.
What a great introduction. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So tomorrow morning, Saturday, September 10th at 10:30 a.m., by our Torah service with Aliyah by Howard Eisenstark, Barbara Gardner, and Ann Parsley. We've been learning with Leah Savage in our adult trope class. So if you're interested in being in the next adult trope class, please contact Leah. On Sunday at 9:30, religious school will be held here at CBS. And as we get closer to the high holidays, we'll begin this coming Saturday with Slichot. We'll join Rabbi and Gordon for a reception with Light Nosh, followed by an outdoor service in the Founders Glen. You can RSVP for that online. And with the high holy days only a few weeks away, if you have not yet registered for services and or begun your membership payments, please do so as soon as you are able to. Of course, if you need to make any special arrangements, please contact Roberta via president@cbsnapa.org. And we'd also like to give some warm wishes to this week's birthdays and anniversaries. So happy birthday to Denise Kaduri, Michelle Herbs, Wolf Lehman, Tama Edelman, Jennifer Walker, Dahlia Aronson Lopez, Lauren Goldstein, our new member, and Tricia Florsheim. And happy anniversary to Michael and Leslie Deller, celebrating their 40th. David and Mary Pim Marjolies, celebrating their 44th. David and Lola Safer, celebrating their 53rd anniversary. And Jan and Tom Sabo, celebrating their 32nd anniversary. So happy anniversary to everybody. And I believe that is all the announcements for this evening. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
As we near the end of our service, our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, those who have died both recently and in seasons past. We honor the memories of those who have died during the preceding 12 months. Erica Cornelison, Gladys Shubin, Richard Magano, Clark Smith, Stephanie Rab Axner, David Ernesto Kaplan, Pat Pate, Annette Goldberg, Maggie Sherman, Sandra Banco-Fichtenberg, Nicholas Huff, George Montano, Dean Wilson, Norman Charney, David Alpert, Renee Munoz, Michael Kassin, Paul Dworsky, Ed Eston, Micah Bisel, Jill Daly Katz, and Gabrielle Harrison Escalera. We also honor and remember the yard sites, the anniversaries of the deaths of Beatrice Samrick, Shirley Gordon, Ken Levine, Gary Stoltz, Martin A. Cohen, Louis Kamer, Grace Becker, Marion S. Lehman, Sylvia Galler, and William Isidore Teller. And if anyone has a name they wish to add, I invite you to please do so. The mourner's Kaddish is on page 598. Please rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, be'alma divrach herutei v'yamlik malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, b'agala uvizman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'lamel maya, Yitbarach v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, Yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudsha b'richu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. May the source of peace grant peace to all those in mourning and comfort to all those who are bereaved. And let us all say amen. Please be seated. Before I introduce our guest speaker, we're going to conclude with a final song. And we are going to do Kiddush and Motzi after Congressman Thompson speaks, because we have some wine and food waiting for us later. But what do you want to close with tonight?
Let's do Shir Chadash, page 648.
Make sure everything's on here. Okay, I think we're good.
I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru God. Shiru l'Adonai, kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shir chadash.
Thank you, Gordon. Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos again to everyone. Our guest speaker and our guest tonight, in many ways, needs no introduction. Congressman Mike Thompson is you don't have to get up yet. I got to introduce you first. Congressman Mike Thompson is a powerful force in Washington, a major player in California politics, a well-known and well-regarded figure here in our area, and I have to tell you, you're everywhere. I've been here only 5 years, but you're absolutely everywhere, and you've been a congressman who has well represented our community for many years, and I think that's a testament to how well respected you are as a leader. So as our leader, I am grateful to you for offering a little bit of your time to share some words with us tonight, and Congressman Thompson has also offered to take a few questions. So, Congressman Thompson.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. That was a very nice introduction. I don't know if I should, maybe I should just sit down and not tarnish that at all. Well, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor to be with you again, and I have been here a number of times, and I appreciate it very much. So I want to give a special shout out and thank you to Rebecca Koch, who I think kind of arranged this and made it happen. She's a good friend. In the bicycle community, we call her the Ark. And that's not the Ark that's behind me. That is an acronym for the amazing Rebecca Koch. And for any of you who have followed some of the programs that she's done, including the gun violence prevention bicycle ride that she puts on for me, she just does a wonderful job. So Rebecca, thank you. And thanks to all of you. You're an important part of our community. I believe strongly that the Jewish community is the cornerstone, a cornerstone of our community, not just here in Napa, but throughout our entire region. I believe, and I hope you agree, that I'm a strong and longtime supporter of Israel, and I think my record speaks well of that. And some of you know this. I know David and Donna do for sure, but some of you may not. I'm Jewish by marriage. Can you do that, Rabbi? Can you?
I'm liberal. You can do anything.
See, what happened was my younger brother left St. Helena and went to the seminary to be a priest. And he came very, very close to becoming a priest. I think he was like a semester away. And he quit. He dropped out, and he did what I guess all good folks who are trying to become a priest do. He married a nice Jewish girl. And it's a great family. As a matter of fact, my nephew, their son, called me as I was getting out of my car tonight, and he said, I hope you don't use this against me in the future. But I answered, and he said, hey, Uncle Mikey, what are you doing? And he's married with his own kids now, but that's been a long-standing title that I've earned in the family. And I said, well, I'm going to temple. So I got to tell you, thank you, because it really gave me street cred with Alex. So I've been to Israel a number of times. I've been there as a member of Congress, and I've been there a few times as a member of the Intelligence Committee. I served on the House Intelligence Committee for 8 years, the maximum time allowed, and I took a number of trips to Israel. And I believe that Israel is a beacon of democracy, and Israel is our strong ally in a very rough and tough part of the world. So I've always tried to provide strong support and to ensure that Israel has the resources they need to defend themselves, defend their people, and continue to be a strong ally to our country. I've voted for funding to ensure that happens, and I will continue to do that. Just recently, we passed in the House an emergency funding bill to provide incredibly important funding to Israel, $1 billion with a B, and that's, even for Congress, that's a lot of money to support the Iron Dome in Israel, and you know how important that is, and that came on the heels of thousands of rockets launched from Gaza terrorists, and it's an important program. It needs to continue. And right now, we're working in partnership with Israel for new defense systems. And the idea is to partner in high energy laser weapons for defensive purposes for our Israeli allies. And I think that's important, and I certainly hope that that we're able to do that. And I think support for Israel goes hand in hand with support for our Jewish community here in the United States. I think that's very, very important. And Rabbi, you asked if I would speak specifically about some of the anti-Semitism that's happening right now. And I can tell you it's incredibly troubling. And not just for the Jewish community, but I think for all of your friends. It's a terrible thing that's going on. In 2021, there were 3,000 cases, documented cases of attacks on Jews in our country, and that's about a 30% increase from the year before. And that should be troubling for everyone. It's certainly unacceptable, and it seems to be everywhere. I've got a colleague who thinks that it was the Jews shooting laser beams from outer space that started the fires that devastated our area. And anytime anybody talks silly like that, it is a bad reflection. But you know firsthand the anti-Semitic flyers that were passed out, largely in Sonoma County, but over in Napa County also. And that was at the hand of someone from Sonoma, from Petaluma, actually, not the part of Sonoma that I represent, but troubling. And you also know that person is in prison in Poland right now. So it's out there, it's frightening, and it can't be tolerated. Now, Congress has responded. We've passed a number of pieces of legislation, everything from congressional resolutions putting on paper in the record our support for Jewish members of our community, and very outspoken criticism about this type of behavior, all the way to include legislation that was passed that would designate an individual within the U.S. State Department to head up the effort to deal with, to follow, to collect data and deal with this issue. Not only anti-Semitism here, but around the world, and that is important. And I want to also mention that I mentioned that Rebecca does the bicycle ride for gun violence prevention in the Napa Valley, and it's an important issue. But it's an important issue for Jews across our country as well. And there's been some very documented terrible cases, and I've made a list of them. April 2019, San Diego, one person killed, 3 wounded, and a rabbi also involved in that, wounded in that. October 2018, the Tree of Life tragedy in Pittsburgh, 11 people killed, 11 Jews killed, 6 wounded. And then July 4th this year in Highland Park, Illinois, a major Jewish area in Illinois, 7 people killed, 48 people wounded. And that's a tragedy. And gun violence is a tragedy irrespective of who the victims are. But these were documented cases against the Jewish community, and something that can't be taken lightly. I've been working on gun violence prevention for a while in Congress now, and have had some success in passing legislation that I've written on requiring people to pass a background check before they can buy a gun. Terribly radical legislation. Can you imagine that? A check to make sure that the gun purchaser isn't a criminal or dangerously mentally ill. And terribly controversial from a political perspective. You know, there's only 90% of the American people support that legislation. And I've passed it out of the House twice. It gets over into the Senate, and it ends up with a lot of other bills that don't get any further than the U.S. Senate. And I passed it again this year, and it was over in the Senate. And then when the tragedy happened in Uvalde, Texas, things shifted a little bit. There was a little more interest on the part of people to do something. And the something started in the House. Myself, Jerry Nadler, and Sheila Jackson Lee. Sheila chairs the subcommittee of judiciary that deals with that. Jerry Nadler is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. We wrote legislation specifically dealing with gun violence, and it passed with a strong vote out of the House. And that came at the right time. The Senate actually got to work and passed something. They passed what's known as the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And it was a big step, given that Congress hasn't done anything on gun legislation in decades. And this bill is pretty good. It enhanced background checks for young people. You know, there's a problem. Kids, their records don't get scrutinized when they do a background check. So it provides for an enhanced background check for 18 to 20-year-olds. And gun shows, that some of us are familiar with those. They take place in big public buildings, and you can rent a table, and from your table you can sell guns. In some states, not in California, our laws are a little stricter, but in some states, those tables are rented by different people. Sometimes they're licensed firearm dealers, and if a licensed firearm dealer is selling in a gun show, they have to do all the paperwork and the background check. But regular folks, just an individual can come in and rent one and sell his or her personal guns. And this has really been stretched to the limits. So you have people that show up at every gun show selling their personal guns, and bottom line, they're a dealer. And this law, this bipartisan measure, Safer Communities Act, dealt with that and redefines what is and isn't a gun dealer. And then before the bill passed, the law said that if you were married to someone and you were a domestic abuser, you were prohibited from owning a firearm. But if you were in a non-marital relationship with someone and you were a domestic abuser, no problem, you can buy a gun if you want. And it's been referred to as the boyfriend loophole forever, and it has been impossible to close that loophole. As a matter of fact, a number of times the reauthorization for the Violence Against Women's Act was derailed because that boyfriend loophole provision was included to close that. And we were able to close that in this bill. It also provides money for community violence intervention programs that have been proven to work throughout the country, and money for schools and for mental health. And please make no mistake, folks who are mentally ill are more often the victims rather than the perpetrators in gun violence. But there is always a need for funding for mental health, so I think this is a good thing. And then the president did something because we couldn't pass a law to do it. The president, with an executive order, changed the law on what's known as ghost guns. And a ghost gun is a kit that you can buy generally over the internet, and it comes to your house. Because it's a kit and not a gun, you don't have to have a background check in order to buy one. And it takes about, I'm told, it takes about 15 minutes and very few tools to put this thing together, and you walk out with a real live functioning firearm. And they're not serialized. And I've always believed that anyone that would go to this extreme to purchase one of these kits and that doesn't have a serial number on it and wasn't purchased with a background check is probably up to no good. And if you follow the news, we're sandwiched between two communities that have real aggressive ghost gun programs, Santa Rosa and Vallejo. And the cops in these two communities are taking ghost guns off the street every day. So the president, through an executive order, has required background checks in order to purchase any of these kits, and required that they be serialized so they can be traced if they are part of a crime. Now, not surprising to anyone here, but troubling, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think earlier this week or late last week, that said some companies are now making individual components. So you don't buy the kit, you buy one component from this guy, one component from that guy, one component from this guy, and you put together an unserialized firearm. So it's going to take continued effort and continued work, but it is something that I think the Jewish community is certainly supportive of, and gun violence is something that rocks us all, and this community as well. And then I would be a terrible politician and you knew that when you came in, that you were getting a politician. I'm a policy guy, and I like to think that I focus on that, but I'm a politician. And I'd be a terrible one if I didn't mention a couple other good things that Congress has been able to accomplish in the very recent past. And one is the COVID Relief and American Rescue Act. That was funding from Congress that kept businesses open, kept employees with paychecks so they didn't lose their homes and their jobs, got schools cleaned up, shots in arms, kids back in those schools, kept local communities funded. You know, that state and local government was on the tip of the spear during this global pandemic. And state and local governments can't print nor borrow money. They can't run a deficit. So if the state and local government doesn't have the funding they need, they either can raise taxes, which I would submit is probably a bad thing to do in the middle of a global pandemic when everything, including the economy, is on the rocks, or they can just fire people. And I think the last thing you want during a global pandemic is to fire your folks who are responding to these issues: healthcare providers, nurses, teachers, firefighters, and cops. So this was important. We also get computer chips. We used to make about 35% of all of the computer chips here in the United States. But they were offshore. That work was offshore, and now we make about 12% of the computer chips here in the United States. And there's one classification of computer chips called significant computer chips. Now, I'm not a tech guy, but just guessing, I think that refers to significant computer chips, and they're important. And we make 0% of those. So this CHIPS bill that we pass is designed to bring computer chip manufacturing back to the United States. And we saw today, if you followed the news, it's happening. Intel is building a new facility in Ohio. They're going to spend, I think it was $27 billion on a new plant there. I believe what I read said it was going to be 7,000 construction workers to build that, and then when it's complete, another 3,000 full-time computer chip manufacturer employees. And they're one of a couple major companies that have already said that they're going to bring their computer chip manufacturing back to the United States. We passed the infrastructure bill. Everybody, I think, has followed that, and as some of you have heard me say before, and those of you who remember the old Buick commercials, it's not your father's infrastructure bill. And sure, there's money in it for highways and roads and bridges, but it really pushes the envelope. There's money here for undergrounding electric wires, which is important, and no one knows that more than us, having lived through all of these terrible fires. There's reconfiguration of the electrical grid, which we need to do, and will help quite a bit. There's money in that bill to beef up our employees who fight these fires. You know, you read all the stories. You know, the federal government couldn't get federal firefighters because they paid peanuts. And you watched firsthand how those infernos that were burning all around us, and people just have a tendency not to want to put their life on the line for, $15 an hour. So we were finally able to get that money up. And one thing that was really important to me was the expansion of broadband. California will get at least $100 million to expand broadband because of this legislation. And I mentioned the COVID bill. In one of the early COVID bills, they included legislation of mine that allowed folks on Medicare to be able to use telemedicine rather than to go to a facility and be exposed to COVID. Telemedicine is something I started working on when I was in the state Senate, passed the first bill in the country to allow non-face-to-face reimbursement for non-face-to-face treatment, which allowed telehealth to really get a foothold, and we're continuing to work on it. Well, imagine if you don't have connectivity and you're on Medicare and you can't get telehealth. So you're getting lesser health care than the person down the street who has connectivity. And the same thing happened with school kids who were doing home learning. If you didn't have connectivity, your kids, your grandkids didn't get the same educational opportunities as the family around the corner. So that's important. And then, we just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, major legislation. I take great personal pride in that because I'm sure you've heard on the news or read in the paper the provisions for renewable energy that are in that bill, the most significant renewable energy legislation to ever pass Congress. And I believe, full disclosure, that the biggest issue we face as a people is climate change. If we get everything else right and we mess this up, it's all for naught. And I say personal pride in that because the provisions in President Biden's started out the Build Back Better bill and ended up the don't call it Build Back Better, call it the Inflation Reduction Act bill. But those renewable energy provisions were my legislation, so I think that was exciting. And today I was over in Sonoma visiting a facility assisted living facility, and the question that everybody had over there is, what are you going to do about prescription drug costs? They're crazy. We know how expensive they are. And this bill had two provisions, actually three, that are important in regard to prescription medication. One, it allows Medicare to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceuticals, and that's a big deal. We've been trying to do that for a long time, and I compare the Medicare system with the VA system. The VA system negotiates for their drugs, and their prices are a lot lower. And I'm a disabled veteran. I'm wounded in Vietnam, so I have access to the VA, and I use it for two things. I use it for hearing aids, and I use it to buy my cholesterol medicine, because the difference is $197 a month or $9 a month. And you know where I'm going to VA. So I think that's a good indication of how we can actually make some inroads in lowering the drug price. We also capped the out-of-pocket price for Medicare individuals to $2,000 a year. So that's the most that a Medicare person will pay. And then the third one is the capping the insulin price at $35. So those were pretty good things, and I think that they speak well of the work that we're able to accomplish in this Congress, and I had to get that in. So thanks so much for having me, and as the rabbi said, I'd be willing to try and answer some questions.
Thank you. So we have time for some questions. Harriet. Oh, and just so you know, even if you don't think you need the mic because there are people watching at home, and because we're streaming, if you don't speak into the mic, they won't be able to hear you. So please speak into the mic.
And if they don't hear you, you weren't there.
Right, exactly.
Thank you for being here. I'm a longtime supporter of yours as well as of Israel, but I am concerned with some of Israel's actions. I have family that still lives there. They were where some of my family who couldn't make it to America in time ended up and are still there. But I am very concerned with Israel's treatment of its Arab citizens. I wonder if you'd speak to that. Thank you.
And it was, help me, it was, family is in Israel?
Yeah, and she wants you to talk about Israel, the treatment of some in Israel toward Arab citizens, toward Palestinians. You get to start with a really easy question.
Yeah. The rabbi warned me. He said, we're very diverse. He said, I hope you have a better time dealing with it than I do. But, well, I think that there's always work and always need for improvement. And I mentioned to you that I've been to Israel in the past. I told you about my Intel trips. I also have been with AIPAC to Israel. And I agreed I guess it was last weekend now, the former ambassador, Alan Solomon, that I would go in 2023 with J Street. And so I think that we need to understand that there's different ideas, there's different thoughts, and we need to figure out how to work together to make those improvements.
Steve.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for being a supporter of Israel for all these years. Can you help me understand a little bit the administration's support for the Iranian deal with all the Sunni Arabs that are saying, please don't do this deal, and that it's so bad for the state of Israel, and it's probably going to lead to a war coming. What is it that the administration is seeing that's beneficial? I know people like Chuck Schumer and all are against it from what I understand. So am I missing something? I don't see why the president's been pushing to make this deal and give out all this money to Iran, which we know is a terrorist state and is going to go for no good cause.
I don't know. I know, presidents can propose, and I certainly don't agree with everything that this president does or doesn't do. But I think that this in the whole idea of separate branches of government, Congress, the president proposes, we dispose, and I can't speak to what he is thinking, but I know that we need to make sure that we're fully engaged.
Thank you. First, thank you for your service, and I want to just ask a question, bring it kind of back local to the 5th District. As you know, California is having a really tough time with homelessness, and we're not strangers to it here in the 5th District, in Napa in specific.
A tough time doing, I'm having trouble here, and tough time
I'm
doing
sorry,
what?
as you know, we're having a big problem with homelessness in the state. Homelessness. Yeah. And it's a big issue for Gavin Newsom to start to deal with. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that in this district in specific, the problem for California in general, and what the federal government and you specifically can do?
Well, I can tell you this. I don't think it is a problem that is exclusive to California. I think every state has some type of homeless problem. Some areas worse than others, and I would suspect that the climate has a lot to do with the seriousness of the problem. But you know, I spend a good part of my week in Washington, D.C., and it's a pretty ugly weather environment in Washington, and there's a homeless problem there. I think the major underlying issue in homelessness is mental illness. I think that is probably, next to climate change, I would say that's one of the biggest problems that we face as a people. And I read the same letters to the editor, and in my town hall meetings, I hear from folks who will say it's drug addiction and it's alcohol addiction. And I'm sure there's drug addiction and alcohol addiction within the homeless community, but I'd be willing to bet that a large part of that stems from mental illness and not being able to get the help and the treatment that you need. And when that happens, people self-medicate, and then it's just a downward spiral after that. I can tell you that housing shortage is a problem. I was over in Santa Rosa today. I was a speaker at a ribbon cutting for a new unit that the Catholic Charities has built over there to provide homeless housing for homeless folks. And Sonoma County has 3,000 people a day that don't have a roof over their head, and they are short 38,000 housing units in Sonoma County. And it was exacerbated when a large percentage of their housing supply burned up in the fires over there. So and then the cost to rebuild, not only the cost of building materials and the cost of labor, but the supply chain stuff. The COVID pandemic really disrupted things and made it difficult. So all of that together, I think, contributes to the problem. But I really believe that the underlying major cause is mental illness. And I've had a number of experiences dealing with the homeless community. And in every instance, that is a big part of it. Now, I mentioned that in the legislation, the Safer Community Act, we provided mental health funds, and I think that's good. And I qualified it by explaining that it's everybody who is that 30 people a day die from somebody shooting them, and every one of those 30 people, the people that shot him were not mentally ill, but mental illness is an issue, and it's terribly underfunded. So any money we can get to provide services, I think, is important. But make no mistake about it, there is not enough money in the world to deal with all the mental health issues and all the mental health services that we need. And so no matter how much money we provide, the collective we're just putting a Band-Aid on a problem. I think the real key is in brain research. We need to figure out how to get ahead of the curve and make the investment, the financial investment, to do the scientific research to figure out why mental illness happens. And I think that's the only way that you can deal with that. So that's kind of a roundabout way of answering it, but it's a problem. It is a real problem. And you can see it in its different levels. I met with somebody the other day, and they said that they worked next to, it was a woman over in Yolo County in the new part of the district, and she said, I worked next to a woman for 3 years before I found out she'd been homeless for 5. And she said, my first question was, well, she says, you're always nice and clean. How do you do that? She said, I go to a fast food bathroom or a gas station bathroom, and I wash. And I go to the laundromat to do my stuff. So there's different levels of it. The person that owns a gym over in Solano County, I don't remember the name of it, but they said it's real cheap. It's like $10 a month to join this. It's a national chain, and they said there are so many people that come into that gym in the morning. They're members. They come into that gym in the morning only to shower and change. They're homeless, but $10 a month. Because a lot of homeless folks have money. You know, they're disabled veterans, they're on SSI, they have Social Security, but they just don't have enough money to live. And so, and you remember Doug Kofer, who was our sheriff here in Napa before John Robertson? He took a part-time gig in retirement in Clayton, down in Contra Costa County, a very wealthy area. And Doug told me they did a homeless cleanup, a group of people sleeping under an overpass. And he said there were two brothers there. And they said, well, you know, where can we take you? We'll take you to a shelter. They said, no, you don't have to take us to a shelter. We each own a house. And each one of them owned a condominium. Their parents had bought it, one for each of them, set up a trust, so the trust fund paid the freight on both places. And they said, we just like to be out. We like to be out and, you know, living under the underpass. And I would submit that goes back to my first comment about mental illness. You know, if you have a house and it's all paid for, it doesn't make much sense to go live under the bridge. But it's a very complex issue, and I just don't think you fix it putting Band-Aids on. I think you've got to do the important research to figure out what makes the brain do these things.
Do we have time for one more?
Sure.
How about over on this side? Anyone over here?
What would happen if you said to the establishment Republicans in Congress, hey, it's time to condemn bad behavior by Trump and by people who say the Jews in outer space are starting the fires? Can you talk to them? Is there hope that Republican establishment, normal types, will come around and speak up?
Well, I don't know what I could do to change people's minds, but I think it is a function of the district from which they're elected, and they need to hear from their constituents. We know that no one spoke up louder nor more clearly than Liz Cheney, and you saw what's happened there. I can tell you that, and let me be clear. There's folks on both sides that are on the fringe. So, and I think everybody knows that. But it is frightening for the institution of representative government as to what's going on the right. It's a far greater problem. We're talking about our democracy and our institution of representative government. And I think the voters need to become more vocal. Now, there's probably some hope in what we're seeing now in this election cycle. There have been a number of these MAGA Republicans who won their primaries who are running for the center. And you've probably read all the stories. You know, they've taken things they've cleaned up their websites, some of the crazy things that they had been posting and saying before. But I just think it has to come from the voters that send these people to Washington. And I think the policy issues that I talked about that we passed in Congress, I think that is a good message to folks, because I'm one of these guys who believe that Congress needs to deliver for the American people. And when people see the government working for them, I think they're less inclined to follow these folks who you're referencing. John Tester, who's a senator from Montana and a friend of mine, every time I see him, if we're walking down the hall or we go into a meeting together, he always tells me the same thing. He goes, Mike, let's get things done. And I cleaned it up, but you get the message. But he's right. You know, we need to get things done, and we need to show the American people that we understand the issues that they're dealing with, and we're there to pass the legislation and do the things that are important to them. And I think that will help clean things up. Now, the folks, anybody who says that our forest fires were started by Jews shooting lasers from outer space, I don't think you change that. I don't think she's salvageable. And there's a couple of them over there that are the same way. And sadly, if you look at that particular colleague of mine, she barely got elected when she was first elected, and she is so incredibly popular in her district now, it's frightening.
We want to be respectful of the Congressman's time, so would you be able to stick around just a couple of minutes if some people have some questions that I didn't get to?
Sure.
Just very briefly. Thank you so much. On behalf of Congregation Beth Shalom, we appreciate your time, your insights, your leadership, and you're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's perfect. And everyone else, we're going to do Kiddush and Motzi, and then we have an oneg waiting for us. So if you would please rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. B'tei avot.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom.